Hello and welcome to the Innovation Women Speak webinar series. My name is Bobby Carlton. I'm the founder of Innovation Women, and I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. So before we get started, I'm going to let you know a little bit more about Innovation Women. Our mission is to connect female speakers to visibility opportunities. And the way that we do that is we have an online platform. Our goal is gender-balanced conferences and events. Our platform is used by both speakers and event managers. Event managers who want to find speakers sign on for free. They get a free account on the Innovation Women platform. And speakers who want speaking engagements and other visibility opportunities sign up for an account. The membership is $100 a year and includes a profile on the website, a weekly newsletter with more than 100 speaking opportunities a week that you can apply for, access to our member directory. We have over 1,500 speakers today. You also get an opportunity to be a guest speaker on our webinar series, and that's where you find yourself right now. You also get great access to speaker resources, discount access to Innovation Women pop-up events. If you need a speaker profile with a video on it, we can help you out. And if you're an author, you will get access to our special promotional package for authors. We have an Innovation Women Amazon store. And if you're not an author, it's a great place to check out our books from our members. And in addition to all of this, we promote what you do. We provide promotion on our social media accounts as well as through our newsletter. So if you're interested in learning more about Innovation Women, you can sign up for our weekly newsletter, or you can just text INNO, I-N-N-O, to 22828. The number is right on the screen. And you can sign up for Innovation Women at innovationwomen.com. And remember I said there was a fee for being a speaker member? You can use the promo code IWWebinar until midnight tonight for 20% off that first year. And that is in all capital letters. So our next event is May 15th. That's 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or actually Eastern Daylight Time, paid and unpaid speaking engagements, creating success with every booking. And our speaker in our next event is Jennifer Ellis. She is the owner of Life Enlightenment, and she is going to talk about how you can get paid and unpaid or marketing speaking engagements. She'll also be explaining how you can find success with every booking where everybody wins, the speaker, the event planner, and the audience. Today's Innovation Women webinar is Melissa Field-Jerkowitz. I can't believe I just screwed up your name again, Melissa. Turquoise. Yes, there we go. Oh, my goodness. So today, Melissa is going to be talking to us about how she got the CTO to pay for open APIs. And this is a lesson in influencing leadership. So take it away, Melissa.
Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate it. And don't feel bad about, about that. I don't feel bad about my name. You are definitely not the first, and you certainly won't be the last. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here and talk to everybody today. So my lesson in influencing leadership is really a story as a pioneer about persuasion and influence, as well as how that weaves into technology. So I'm really excited to share that with you all today. So a little bit about who I am. Melissa Jerkowitz, and I've actually been a technologist for over 2 decades now. So I started about 20 years ago, believe it or not, at the same company that I'm at now. We've gone through quite a few transitions. So when I started back in 1999, the company was founded in the 80s. So it was New Market International at the time. It actually was founded as New Market Software Systems right here in New Hampshire back in the 80s. And then when I started in 99, it was New Market International. So they had branched into an international company, had some satellite offices around the world, but they primarily were based in here in New Hampshire. And it was a hospitality software company. So it was rooted in a founder that works at Marriott, actually. And so they built software focused around sales and catering in the hospitality space, started with hotels and then branched out to venues, stadiums, casinos, and various other sort of ancillary markets. And that's really sort of the bread and butter of where it was born. And then back in 2014, it was acquired by Amadeus, which is better known for its airline software offerings, both for airports and airline IT and travel overall. So they purchased us back in 2014 to branch out into hospitality and become more of a global travel and hospitality provider overall. And so we are now, instead of a company that was roughly around 700 after acquisition, we are a company of about 12 to 13,000 worldwide. So it's quite a shift for all of us. But what I've done there is for about the first dozen or so years, I was a software engineer. So I was fingers to keyboards, totally coding my head off and loved it. And that's really where my passion for technology comes from. And like I said, about 12 or 13 years in, I was approached by a gentleman, a good friend of mine actually, that I had worked with and alongside for years, who had risen up to enterprise architect and was also had a dual role at the time that he had just acquired for director of our product management team. So he approached me. I was coming off of a 3-year stint in reporting and analytics, and he actually approached me and asked me to join. They had an opportunity to join his team. And of course, I was elated because I was a technologist. He was an enterprise architect. That was what his primary role was. And I didn't even think about that he was also the director of our product management team at the time when he had asked me to come see him. So I was thinking, this is awesome. I'm going to join the enterprise architecture team. This is the great next step for me in my career. I've been an engineer for all these years. I've been a technical lead. Now I'm going to be an architect. This is amazing. So when I sat down in his office, he said, I have an interesting opportunity for you to join my team. And I was like, yeah, I'm so excited. And he said, yes, I want you to become a product manager. And my initial reaction was, gross. Why would I ever do that? Like I said, again, I was super passionate about technology. So to me, product management was like all about just like business and, going out and talking to customers and roadmaps. And this was like not at all in my realm of, interest really. So of course, after he got over being initially insulted, he said, it would be great if you considered it. So after some conversation, he convinced me that what he needed me for was a very unique niche. And it was our ability to provide a services platform that was focused on delivering APIs as products. Now, he didn't put it in that term. I'm sort of paraphrasing because at the time, no one was really thinking of APIs as products, which is what we'll get to as I get through describing my story. But I convinced him to put technical in front of the title. That was like my caveat. I had to have it. And from then on, I became, at the time, the technical product manager for our New Market Web Services platform. And as it evolved and as we were acquired, it became Amadeus Hospitality Web Services. I went into a product strategist role around that and really crafted out what our API strategy was. And then most recently, as you can see, I'm the senior solutions architect for our enterprise solutions team and work on APIs and lots of other things with our very large enterprise customers. And I travel around the world and talk to them about how they can apply our solutions to their business problems. So quite a bit of an evolution of me, but what I want to talk to you guys today about is really around that sort of pivotal role that I entered into in API strategy and product management of that, which again was really a new role for me. So entering into that new role, like what did I do, right? So I was an engineer, like I said, for 13 years, and now I'm in product management, and yeah, I've got technical in my title, and that's great, but like, what am I actually going to do now? So this platform had sort of evolved with architects at the helm. And so anybody that's been in technology or worked with engineers would probably argue that that was the insane people running the asylum, right? So there was no direction or roadmap or even business thought around what to do next or what to build. There were literally just architects and engineers just building things because it was cool and it was fun and it's what they wanted to do. So I had a bit of a hurdle there to get over, but what I thought, what I really need to do is understand my new role by researching. And that's sort of just how I operate when I enter something new and I'm in that pioneering mindset. I'm like, okay, well, guess what? I need to understand and read all the books and go to the events and understand what I'm getting myself into so that I can talk the talk and walk the walk with these people so they'll relate to me. And that's really how I set out. I said, okay, well, what is it that we're talking about here? What is the point? Why do we need someone in product management here? Why can't it just be the engineers driving the train? And what I immersed myself in by reading all the books and going to the events was a lot of buzzwords, because around that time frame, we're talking like in 2013, 2014 time frame, we really started to see all these buzzwords emerge. So Salesforce was coming out and saying, hey, we're a platform company now. We're not, they always were like no to software, but they're like, we're not even a solution provider. We're a platform company. We want everybody to build on us, and we're open, and we have services. So there was a lot of open, that was like a big buzzword. The API economy, how to unlock your platform, expose your data to create an ecosystem for other people to work with, how to be a great partner. Like all these things were all the buzz, lots and lots of research around APIs. It was just starting to be talked about as APIs as products. So I really did all that deep digging around, what's out there, what could I read, what I sort of just dove right in. And what really happened was I got really excited about it because I saw this new space and nobody within my organization was even thinking like this. And so I got really excited in the research with the data and talking to people at these events, like other people that had either already done something like that and launched an API program or were thinking about it too, and just really understanding what it took and how did they do it. And I saw the potential and I could see what was possible. And so I was already starting to formulate this vision. So it was great, but then I realized, well, crap, now I have to show other people what I felt like I could already see. And so that was where, APIs aren't new, right? Like they've always been out there and they've maybe not necessarily referred to in sort of as a first-class citizen, but they were really about connections. It was about connecting things. And a lot of times they were not centralizing connections, right? And APIs were trying to say, hey, let's put everything out there in a way that's, now we have the internet, let's centralize it and expose it in a way where we're not talking client to client anymore. And so I saw opportunity. I saw it was clearly right in front of my face. And so now I said, okay, I've got this vision. How do I get other people to come along with me? And what I realized pretty quickly was, there was a problem because this wasn't new. In fact, we had been integrating as an organization. I mentioned we were born in the 80s, right? Well, in hospitality, as in any other industry, there are always, your customers are not only using your system, they're using other systems. I mean, that's where the term ecosystem comes from in the tech space, right? There are a lot of things, and what ideally you want is sort of a plug and play picture of that. Well, it's not that easy, right? So a lot of these systems come from very, diverse vendors that maybe sometimes don't play nice together. So it's a challenge for customers out there today. And so we had been integrating, to the purpose of providing value holistically to our customers with external partners for 20 plus years. So me coming into this role, even though it was a new role for our organization, I got the technical in the title, and even though it was a new role to me and a new mindset, it was not new to what we were trying to do or had always done for the market. It always integrated, always, but for the last 20 years, right? Integrated with other partners in this space to provide a hospitality industry what they needed to be able to complete their business processes. So not being new, then it's like, well, the resistance I was met with was what are we doing that we have to do different? Like, it's already working, so why change it, right? So, there was that complacency aspect. I even had many times more than one person, including the VP of our R&D organization, say, well, why don't we just give them a zip file? We've always given them a zip file and it works. And that's a hard argument to come up against because, quite frankly, it did work. And quite frankly, we could have still done that. It certainly would have worked. It A, would have checked the box of meeting the market need. It B, would have made the customers happy, because I don't think that they necessarily would have cared as long as it met the requirements they had for those two systems to be able to work together. And honestly, our partners really wouldn't have known any different. So when you put all those things, like, it almost seems bad business to try to think of how to do it any differently. So I came of this, realization that sometimes you have to just take a risk even when you don't feel like it's necessary. Because I couldn't argue that it was necessary, because you doing things the old way was totally feasible. In fact, like I said, checked all the boxes. So that was where the challenge came from. The way I sort of described it was, innovation and opportunity don't come from complacency and comfort. And that was the pillar that I would stand behind in sort of my soapbox. It was like, discomfort and creativity are like tequila and salt. They're pairings that lead to really great things. And so I would talk the talk and I would get people excited about it, but then it didn't necessarily move to the next phase. And so I was like, okay, I need to do more. What else can I do? So again, this was a new role for me. So I said, okay, well, what else can I do? I think this is true certainly in tech, maybe in all things, but for sure in tech, right? Because tech's moving so fast, you can be sure that what's happening outside your organization is light years ahead sometimes of even where you already are, even if you are advancing and trying to be innovative. It just is changing so rapidly. And what's interesting is, you have to always remember you are not the first to have this problem. And that was where I sort of grounded myself. Okay, I'm not alone. I'm not the first to have this problem. I don't have to know it all. I don't have to have all the information, but I did have to be willing to ask and know where to ask. And some people struggle with that. And, I think that the issue is not accepting that you don't have to know it all. You also realize that it's not lazy or incompetent to have to know where to go to ask it. I would actually argue that it's resourceful. And honestly, your fastest path to success, because again, you are not the first to have this problem. And so that's what I did. I said, you know what? Well, who do I know that already had this problem? Well, guess what? I had gone to some events. I met a lot of amazing people across many different industries. I didn't meet anybody in the hospitality space. I met people in digital media. I met people in technology, communications, in advertising. I met all kinds of different people that were all sort of, pivoting and thinking of, okay, what's this digital transformation for us? What does this mean? How can we adopt an API strategy? How does it relate to our market, our customers? So I started to, I'd made some great connections. I had collected some business cards, and I started to reach out and I started to ask them, like, have you started on this journey? What did you do first? How did you convince stakeholders? Did you already have leadership buy-in? I asked a lot of questions, and I have to say I'm really grateful, because if it wasn't for how open people were from the external network perspective and the people that I met, and then they connected me with other people, and it was kind of this crazy domino effect. I learned a ton in a short period of time. So it certainly was the fastest path. If I had tried to do that independently, I never would have acquired that level of knowledge in such a short period of time. And when I say short, I mean within like a 2-month time period, I learned what each of them had done from a strategic perspective. They shared all of their evaluation data that they had done across any sort of technology or vendors that they had tried to apply to the problem. And they were just really open and like sharing with me, and that was helpful. So I had all the data. I was like, all right, I have all the data. I am armed and ready to go. But I still had to educate people and gain momentum. So that was still a challenge. So now what do I do with all this data? And that was where my internal network came through, because I had to get some advocates internally. So now I had this information. I felt like I was empowered. I was able to tell a great story. I could talk about what others' successes and failures were and how we could move past them, what we could do differently or better, what we maybe could adopt the same. But now it was, okay, well, I need to get other people bought into that. And I needed to find a few advocates. So that's exactly what I did. I started doing sort of a little internal roadshow to share the information and try to get people excited about that vision that I had so clear of where we needed to go. And realized, through my research, there was some things that I needed to do that was going to require budget. And I wasn't able to convince, at the time, our product management team was embedded within our R&D organization. So to be able to do anything, I needed to get R&D budget. I needed to have a team of engineers to work alongside me that I could build a backlog that they'd be able to do these things. And I wasn't able to convince our R&D organization to provide a team to me for this purpose at this time. Again, because I was battling against the complacency and the norm around, well, what we're doing still works, so we don't really see the benefit to do all this other stuff, because we could just package it up to the external world the same way we always have. So that was the challenge. So I was lucky enough to get some buy-in from actually a couple of directors in our organization, the director of data intelligence at the time, and a director in operations. And the three of us sort of banded together as this little cohort, I would say sort of scheming around what the strategy could be and how we would do it. And I was able to leverage budget that they had to start to apply it to solve the business problem. So leveraging both that external network that I had acquired through my research, as well as starting to use that research and that data to tell a great story, to start to get other people interested that had budget that they could apply to help move the problem and gain momentum. And that's really, you know, that's great, right? So now I had people behind me, I had data behind me, but the key, that wasn't it, right? So like there was gas in the car, I was sitting in the driver's seat, I could put the key in the engine, but I still wasn't going anywhere. So now what did I do? You know, where do you start with that? And that's really, honestly, out of everything else and all the other parts of that story, was probably the most overwhelming part, was where to start. And I would say it is very scary taking that first step. You know, there's questions you'll ask yourself, like, what if I'm wrong? So for me, I wasn't as scared about being wrong, but I was worried about losing the buy-in from leadership if what I proposed didn't take on quick. And also losing that internal advocacy that I had built with those two directors and, you know, convincing them to leverage budget to move some of this forward. But I started to craft the puzzle pieces together through the collaboration and the cooperation of those individuals and of the external network to be able to start to tell a story. And APIs are a tricky space, right? Like, so bringing it back to the technology aspect of it all, an API is a contract with somebody external to you. So once you put it out there, you can't really take it back. Not easily anyways, and not without disrupting somebody else's potential business model, strategy, success overall. So that makes it a little bit scarier to try to figure out where to start. And honestly, like, once you put it out there, taking it back is, I would say, like putting toothpaste back in the tube. I think we can all appreciate how really challenging that can be. So you want to try to avoid it. So that certainly applies the pressure. Where I found myself grounded were in these kind of principles. So you have to start somewhere, but you do not have to go overboard, right? So keeping sort of that, you know, simplistic mindset of keeping it simple, but planning that it could fail. And that was probably the scariest part too. Like, knowing that there might be something you put out there, someone may adopt it, and they may not have success with it right away or ever. And you may have to iterate on that. And you may have to be able to have room for change and room for feedback and working with your customers, your developers that are out there leveraging your API. So that's got to be built into your strategy. You have to plan for that failure. And practicing something that, you know, there's an acronym out there, YAGNI, YAGNI, and basically what it means is you aren't going to need it. So it's really speaking to those people that understand, like, lean methodologies. It's just do what you absolutely have to do now, because you can always add later, but boy, it's very hard to skim the fat after. So really focus on simplicity and only doing the things you absolutely have to do now. And for us, some of those things where there was complexity was certainly around security, like putting APIs out there that would allow someone to do things like read and write into your system. There's not, you know, there's a level of complexity around that. That's certainly not simple. So we immediately said, okay, read only is the way we're going to go right now. The strategy is going to be, you know, simple APIs. They're going to be read only. We're not going to do all the bells and whistles, even though we could. We're going to try to find the simplest use case and just nail it. And just do that one thing really, really well. That's going to work both from a market appeal, and it's going to work when you're trying to convince stakeholders too, because you're going to see success a lot faster. And quite frankly, leadership needs to see tangible success. So just make sure it's small enough that you can actually create that full experience, because that's what everyone's looking for. People are desperately waiting to see the full picture come together. And honestly, that's where you start to build that picture. So, I mentioned before, I had the vision, right? I could see, like, towards the end of the tunnel, I could see where we could be. But I wasn't, even though I was telling the story and I was getting people really excited about it, they weren't seeing that. So what I realized was, it wasn't that I wasn't telling a great story. I had now had external advocates that were sharing information. I was armed with the data. I had my internal advocates that were saying, okay, you can leverage my budget. But I had an approach of, okay, I've identified a use case. It's really simple. I'm just going to make it read-only. These APIs are going to be, lightweight. We're going to be able to turn them around quickly. Usability is going to be great. Everything seemed like it was lining up great, but I still wasn't able to convince leadership. And I'm like, all right, I'm missing a key ingredient here. So I had to convince them, even though they didn't share my vision. And that's interesting when you get to that pivotal moment of realizing what you can see, others cannot see. And so how did I do that? Well, I'll say the first thing I realized was, in software, the abstract is super challenging for people above a certain level. And what's interesting that I learned was even some leadership people that had been in engineering in the past were struggling with seeing APIs as a product, or seeing them as like something that had business opportunity and a potential revenue model and all of these like things that you would associate with a product, or, like another set of, capabilities in software or something that you were doing. It was sort of looked at as this sort of backseat, like something that was necessary to connect solutions, but not something that was in the forefront and should be talked about openly and thought about independently. So I was battling all of those things, and I realized it wasn't that the data was wrong. It wasn't that the business case wasn't present. It was really around the people. And so what I learned really, I wish it was quicker, it wasn't quickly, but what I learned over that process was, don't target your responses at people. Target at what they say and do, because there's a difference. And so really it's about knowing your audience. So the audience I had in leadership at the time, what they were saying and doing was telling me clearly that they didn't share my vision. They didn't see what I was saying. And I realized really quickly the only way to really get them to do that, to see it, was to actually build it. So now I said, okay, I have the data. I know a path. I'm fairly convinced that I need to build something that shows them how we can market this holistically out in the community and give it a face. And so I went back and consulted with all of my network around like how had they done this in the space, what had they used, and went back to the research. And it really, what surfaced up was they had all built literally a user experience around this to be able to publish APIs in that different way. And so through the research and the comparison and leveraging, again, what all of my network had shared with me, I realized we needed to just build this. We needed to build a developer portal. We needed to publish the APIs I had identified, that small read-only set of APIs that were a simplistic use case with like hundreds of partners out there that had worked with us in the past in a very similar way, but this would just be like a fresher model of it, so easy to like adopt. So went through the research, used the budget, and actually an additional team member on one of my internal advocates team to throw together a prototype. And we partnered with Microsoft to build a developer portal to be able to publish these simple APIs. And also, it was interesting because I wish, you always want to have a crystal ball, right? You want to know, okay, I'm predicting that this is something that's going to be right. You want to be able to know that that's where it's going to be. But you can't, right? You can't do that. So in the absence of a crystal ball, knowing whether your predictions are going to be right, I settled for a simple developer portal and a great use case that met a market need. And I guess, what ended up happening was working with Microsoft. They loved what we were doing, and they loved it so much, they actually published a press release and a customer success story with us adopting their API management solution. And it was just an interesting combination because they also were trying to do something new as Microsoft, this monopoly in the software industry, had just acquired API management software. So it was this just perfect blend of synergy where they wanted to go out showing how people were adopting their new technology and be really present in that space. They fit exactly what we needed to do, and they were a great partner, and we were already a Microsoft Gold partner at the time. So it was perfect timing, and what we did was we did exactly that. We published a simpler developer portal on Microsoft Azure API management. We published that simple set of APIs. We were able to engage with a partner really early to do some prototyping and piloting, and then share that with our customers for a market need that was very necessary and evident. And it was a great success. And what's really interesting about that is that outcome that I created for leadership ended up being those same people that didn't see it at the time ended up leveraging it and using it in multiple like C-suite conversations, even above their level with our parent company, which was really interesting and somewhat validating and satisfying for myself and the team. And really it proves out sometimes you just have to go to that next level because you honestly just don't know what you're going to be able to unveil until you put it out there. So there was a lot of risk involved, but it really did pay out in the end. And APIs, I would say, are kind of like a trail, right? So, they are blazing a trail. They continue to blaze a trail. And what we chose to do and what I chose to do is to treat them like products, define the market problems that they're solving, similar to how you do with any other products out there. Don't treat them like something different. Oh, these are, it's too techy. API, people don't even know what that means, and like kind of be fearful or cautious around it. Like it's technology solving a business problem. So treat it like exactly that, and know what the business problems are that you're solving. Know the user personas that they're targeted for, and who the problem is, and who's going to leverage them. And most importantly, make sure, like with anything you would do, applying a pragmatic marketing, approach to whether they're urgent, pervasive, and someone was willing to pay for them. And if you can satisfy all of those things and gain leadership buy-in, you're going to have something incredible out there, and it's going to continue to live beyond you. So I'm not in that role anymore. Still working with customers around APIs, but I'll tell you that what emerged from that was such a small group that then had buy-in that now works not only on the developer portal, which they're still adding APIs and products to month over month, iteration over iteration, but many, many teams, in fact, an entire agile release train that's working on our API strategy. So it certainly has evolved over the last few years, has tremendous amount of roadmap, vision, and budget supported behind it. And it all started from an idea, a vision, and trying to pave the path for how to get people convinced. And it really was around making it tangible and something that people could visualize. And the visualization, it's certainly, you can't discount that, but it's not over, right? So even the story I just told around persuasion and being able to convince people, however powerful, it doesn't end. There's continual challenges ahead that you have to consider. And I believe it's possible to prove and show like there's an ROI for things like this, like APIs, that seems sort of abstract and not tangible because there's not something that you can certainly wrap your head around, especially from a leadership perspective. But I believe there's ways to measure that and return it and really get people more focused around it, because APIs are not a supporting role anymore. They are now emerging. We've got beyond the buzzwords, and they're actually, presenting themselves as a revenue-generating product with endless opportunities. So I recommend, everyone kind of wrapping their heads around that and being able to use what we used to think of as purely technology to something that is more strategic and does provide value beyond just connecting systems. So that's my story of how I leveraged API as a strategy and technology around convincing our leadership team to sponsor the program and how it's evolved to date. So I'll take any questions.
Yeah, that's a great story, Melissa. Thank you so much. I love this story. So listeners, if you have any questions for Melissa, now is the time to put them into the system, and we will be answering those. Oh, we have a question right now. Our first question from our audience is, Melissa, can you tell us about your biggest challenge?
Oh, that's easy. That's a great question. So my biggest challenge, and this will be true of anyone, I'm sure anyone's listening that's nodding when I say this, is mindset, right? So like just with, culture change too, right? So the biggest challenge is overcoming sort of the jaded, complacent mindsets that exist. And I don't even mean that in a negative way. We all have it. So we all are sort of creatures of habit and set in our ways. And I think that was always the biggest challenge because, again, I don't think that anything I said wasn't rooted in data or somewhat, even in some cases, obvious. I think the biggest challenge was just getting people to think differently. And that's really tough. And so it took, as you heard, quite a few different approaches for me to sort of, okay, I made it this far. Now I have this. Now what? Okay, I've got this. Now what? And sort of just not giving up. So I would say like the perseverance. Because just knowing it's just not going to be an easy journey. You're going to have to get people to think differently, and that is certainly challenging. That was the biggest challenge.
You definitely proved persistence pays off there.
Yeah.
So our next question is, how did you choose which technology to use in your buy decision?
Yeah, that was honestly, again, going back to leveraging the network, like being resourceful, it was really easy. It was easier than it probably should have been because I really didn't have to do, when you're going into that space, like when I was doing the research around API management solutions, there was quite a few providers at the time. Like, remember, it was like the time when the buzzwords were emerging and people were starting to realize, oh, I could actually like make a product of this, and I could like give it a face. And so there was a lot of people in the space that were kind of honing the market on how to automate a developer portal and how to manage your APIs, and like it was becoming its own space. So there was quite a few vendors out there. And again, it would have taken me, as it did some of the great people that were sharing this information with me, months to go through this level of evaluation. And they had all the evaluation criteria. I mean, I had people sharing information where they had vendor days, and they had invited, like Hearst was one of them, invited all of these vendors in this space, in the API management space, to their company, and they held like a vendor day, right? I was so lucky and grateful that this person that I had just met, like, shared all the information from their vendor day. And then I had another person that shared all her information that they had done a similar level of evaluation, not that formal, but they had some developers that had, done the evaluation for each of these solutions and compared and stacked them and ranked them against each other in different categories. And these categories, remember, I wasn't the first person to have this problem. So these categories were exactly what I would have measured, like things like performance, throughput, cost, cost, annual subscription cost, what you got for that price, like what are the different packages, what was the support model, like basic things around software that you would look at if you were looking at a buy versus build decision. And build really wasn't an option for me because I didn't have a development team. So I knew if I was going to do this thing, it had to be buy. And I also knew I didn't have like an enormous budget because I was sort of phoning a friend and borrowing. So I had to be pretty lean on the financial side. So when I got to Microsoft, like I said, I actually, truth be told, didn't go after Microsoft. I was going after a company called Epiphany. And I couldn't get these guys on the phone. And they were one of the people that I didn't have a ton of data around, but a couple people had compared and stacked them up as being like a good lightweight provider, especially from a cost perspective. But I couldn't get them on the phone. And I was trying to figure out what was going on. Well, what was going on was they were being acquired by Microsoft at the time. So they had let go of their entire sales force because they were sort of merging into Microsoft. So I did get a call from one of their co-founders eventually, within like, I think a couple weeks. It wasn't like a super long time. And I still am in touch with him today, and he's been a great advocate on the Microsoft side now that he's been acquired, because it was in his best interest to find somebody externally, similar to what I was doing sort of in reverse, to partner with, to try to tell a great story to, you know, the market and stakeholders internally at Microsoft about how this solution could be adopted. So that was, I picked them because they were a great partner, and again, there was a tremendous amount of synergy and motivation, which is always helpful for momentum, right? Because he was willing to fix things and move forward with us at a pace that other vendors would not have been. And then the cost, you could not beat it. Like, so the cost of entry was so low for us to do that, where I didn't have to sign like a year-long enterprise contract for hundreds of thousands of dollars for something I wasn't even sure was going to get off the ground, quite frankly. Like, I had the vision, but I didn't have a business case to prove out and warrant that kind of investment. So minimal to low investment to get in the door. And that meant low investment on exit, because we didn't have to invest a ton to build a prototype and to start to launch this and do a soft launch and work with a partner. So really it was the partnership with Microsoft, the synergy that I felt in there, where they were in their journey because of the recent acquisition, and where we were sort of like acting like an entrepreneur in my company as a startup. And then like that cost point, you couldn't beat it compared to others.
Nice. Actually, we've got a couple more questions that have popped up here, but before we get to those, I just have to ask one question. Did your two contacts kind of agree? You said you got information from two different people, and I'm just curious, were both like, yes, the same thing, or did they totally disagree?
They were, it was interesting. There was a couple of differences. In fact, who they ended up going with, they both ended up going with two different providers. I think at the time, all the providers have been sort of swallowed up by larger companies now, but at the time, I think one of them went with Mashery, which was where I actually met them, was at a conference sponsored by Mashery, but Mashery was then purchased by Intel, which was now acquired by something else. And then the other one, I think, went with Apogee, and everyone knows Apogee. Apogee was just acquired by Google. So they've sort of all been swallowed up, just similar to how Epiphany was acquired by Microsoft. So they did have some varying. There were some overlaps for sure, but I think it also, again, like where I went was different than where each of them went, but it was also the maturity around what they were trying to do, and honestly, the sponsorship they had. So those companies had a full budget and like a strategy, business strategy as an organization already behind them. I was trying to gain that. So my motives and like where I was coming from was in a much different space than where they were. But yeah, so, and it was funny because they're very different industries, both those people. And so what they were measuring, even though the factors were the same, they measured them a little bit differently. So that, yeah, that's a great question. And so they didn't exactly line up, but it was like I had to take from it what worked for my position where I was, but it was still hugely valuable because, I mean, some things don't vary, right? Like transaction throughput and, you know, performance, and then of course cost, right? Like those things and how it stacked up. Those things, having them have already gone through all of that, and then their impression about was invaluable to me. Like the fact that they could say, we had this impression of working with them and how easy they would be to work with, that's subjective. And that's hard. Like you don't get that just from like reading their price book, right? You don't get that from reading their list and doing like a compare feature side by side. That's really like, okay, what was your experience when you engaged with them? Like when you had your vendor day or when you were asking them about their ability to adapt or be flexible. And so that stuff was really valuable to me because I knew I had to have somebody that was willing to partner with me and be flexible.
Cool. So another question we've got here, what was your key to success with influencing leadership in your opinion? What was the key?
I would say if I had to like nail it in like one word, maybe it's not one word, but it's, well, simplicity, I would say, would be key. And then also, you know, again, back to like know your audience and be flexible to deliver your message in a way that they need to hear it like that. So I really do think at the end of it all, you know, simplicity played a huge part. And I mentioned that around like being afraid, like, where do I start? And you know, you just sort of have to dial it back and just be like, okay, what is the one thing I could do right now that would move things forward? And you sort of have to just get everybody behind the one thing. And I wish it was that easy, but I do think, you know, after you figure out what that one thing is, it's really know who are the people that you need to get behind the one thing, and what do they need to hear to get behind it, because it's different for different people. So, how I got buy-in from those directors was very different than how I ended up winning over other leadership, people that weren't, as bought into the vision. And so I think it's knowing your audience and being flexible, because I think at first I probably wasn't as flexible. Like I probably wasn't, if I'm being honest, I probably wasn't as open-minded and maybe a little frustrated. Like, why aren't they seeing it? Like, it's so clear to me, like not sort of taking accountability for maybe it's a different way I need to share my message to be able to get them, again, to change their mindset, right? So I guess maybe inevitably the key to success really is be flexible and know who it is that you're talking to and how they need to receive that message, because it's way more important than how you need to deliver it. Like how you might feel super passionate about it is different than how they meant you to hear it, which is hard. That's a hard thing to figure out, but I think that might have been, that was the turning point.
Very neat. And what advice would you give to someone in a similar situation? Obviously, here's the opportunity for 2020 hindsight.
Exactly. Be patient. I would say that's probably not my strong suit. I work on that every day, both personally and professionally. Be patient. Don't start with nothing. Like, don't go in like, guns a-blazing, crazy excited about the vision with no data. Because I did try that. I don't tell that as part of my story, but I did try that. I did sort of like the research, peripheral research enough to know, being a technologist, right? I got excited about the technology aspect of it really fast. Saw some of what other people were doing in a cool way without really engaging like with real data or like the business case of it all or the business need or market need. So I would say be patient and don't, just like I said, don't go in just having this infectious attitude around like your passion, because that's important. It certainly is important because you want people to hear that, and people will pay attention if you're passionate about your message, but it won't seal the deal. Like it just, you gotta be grounded in data. You have to be patient even when you get excited because your excitement, although interesting, is probably not going to get it all the way there. And be, again, focus on the one thing and be really, really focused around getting the data behind that and know who it is that you're talking to. And I think all of those things together, probably patience was the one thing that I didn't have in the beginning. And I realized, that caused maybe some more frustration and maybe even delayed things for me that could have happened a bit faster.
All right. So we're getting toward the end of our time. Thank you so much, Melissa, for your help and taking the time today to do this webinar. Remember, folks, if you are interested in getting involved with Innovation Women, you can go to innovationwomen.com and sign up today. If we didn't get to your question, we will actually do some follow-up on this event. So thank you again for joining us, and we will see you again in just a couple of weeks.